car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
Hello and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. Consumer protection laws, that's our topic of conversation tonight. And if you've ever bought anything, you know the value of knowing your rights so that someone is looking out for you, the consumer. Tonight, that's what we're going to talk about, and we'd love to have you join our conversation. You could call, text, email, that information displayed at the bottom of the screen all throughout the program tonight. So we really make it easy for you to get in touch with us. And also a reminder, all throughout the show tonight, there's an attorney standing by, so you have the opportunity to speak with them as well. Just call that 800 number just to get in touch with them. Leading our conversation from the firm of Hollis, Wright, Carter Clay. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, David. We're going to be talking about, like you indicated, consumer protection rights and laws. And this is a show that is applicable to everybody out there. This is not a show where the viewer can change the channel because this doesn't apply to them. Everybody out there who's watching the show is a consumer in some capacity.
No checking out tonight.
And so that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about how to protect yourself from harassing phone calls, how to protect yourself from harassing debt collectors, and we're going to talk about individual rights relative to the credit reporting agencies that keep track of your credit, and they report things to mortgage companies, information that they provide to determine whether or not you're going to be able to get a loan or not. So this really does apply to everybody out there, and we're very fortunate to have a good friend of mine as a guest here this evening. His name is John Watts. He's a local attorney at Watts and Herring. He's been in this area of legal practice for quite some time. He does an outstanding job at his law firm along with his partner Stan Herring, who I know very well and have known for a long time. So John, we're really glad to have you on the show here this evening. I know you're going to provide a lot of useful information and helpful information to the viewers here this evening. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite and excited to answer questions.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your legal practice relative to consumer protection laws and protecting consumer rights, and how did you get involved in this area of legal practice?
Well, my background is somewhat similar to yours, doing personal injury, and we were closing on our very first house, and I get a phone call from my mortgage broker saying, we have a problem with your credit reports, which is not what you want to hear when you're packing and boxing everything up. And it was an error on our credit report, but it nearly cost us our house. And it took just incredible effort to get it fixed. And I thought, you know, this is what I do for a living. I sue companies and I could barely get this fixed. And so what are they doing to just, you know, people who are not in the legal field? And so started doing more and more of it, and mainly with credit report errors, debt collectors that are harassing us. And then, you know, we all have cell phones now and we get those annoying robo calls, computer calls. So that's mainly what we focus on.
Well, that's great. And Stan Herring, your partner, he does the same thing as well?
Yes.
What are you all seeing in your practice? What is prevalent right now in terms of issues that are out there, really what consumers are facing, problems that they're having, those types of things?
You know, the biggest complaint is really with debt collectors. You know, either the calls that are coming in or false information on credit reports from debt collectors or debt collection lawsuits. You know, some of these companies are filing 100 collection lawsuits a week in Alabama. And so it's affecting so many people. Wow. And then again, just the idea of our cell phones, you know, when you get all these calls and automated text and you're going, who in the world is this?
I want to deviate for just a second because I think it's an important point but if you've got somebody who's having a debt collected against them by a creditor, obviously they may not be financially solvent, they may be having some financial issues. What type of payment arrangement do you have with them as a lawyer? How do you get paid? Because I think that's something that they would want to know if they're watching here this evening.
Most of what we do, well, I'll say it this way, if we're suing somebody, so we're suing a debt collector in federal court, mortgage company, credit reporting agency, whoever it is, we do that on a contingency. So we do not ask the consumer, our client, to bring us any money. We'll get our money from the bad guys that we see.
Okay, and let's do this because I think it will make for a nice flow. We're basically going to be talking about 3 federal statutes here this evening that provide some level of protection to the average consumer out there, correct?
Right.
And I think the first one that you mentioned a minute ago, or briefly touched upon, is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. What is that?
Yeah, so this is known as the TCPA, and it says if you have a cell phone, nobody can use, we call it different things, robo-dialer, computer dialer, auto dialer. In other words, not a human being punching the numbers. If it's a computer calling your cell phone, you had to have given permission for that to happen. Otherwise, that's illegal. And the power of this law is every call can be $500 or up to $1,500 in damages. So we filed a case about 3 weeks ago, 260 calls. So it's 130,000 plus.
Well, I'm probably like most people out there. I exclusively use my cell phone. I told my wife many years ago that I got so tired of our home phone being dominated by telemarketers. That was all it was, the calls that we were essentially getting, that we ultimately just terminated our home phone number. And I have personally found that the telemarketers or robocalls are not nearly as bad on the cell phone as they were on my home phone. Is that just coincidence, or is there some legal reasoning behind that?
Well, the law is, I'll say it this way, more dangerous for the telemarketers if they're calling your cell phone. Same thing with debt collectors. So here in 2016, we noticed that they're more careful about it. 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, they were just calling like crazy. Now we don't see that as much. But one thing I'll just add, I'm the same way. I don't even know my home number. I think we might have one, but I don't ever answer it. So a lot of us use our cell phones and we give that number out. But then if we start getting these robodial calls, we can always take that permission away. So if I gave permission to somebody, I can take it away. And the law allows us to do that. That's where we see the cases now.
Well, and the neat thing is the block caller feature that we all have on our phones now, where you can block the caller and you don't have to deal with it.
It feels good to have that power, doesn't it? Hit that button. Let's step aside for our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder, I'm sure a conversation has triggered a question that you would like to ask. Now's the time to get that question answered. Call, text, email. Also find the firm of Hollis Wright on Facebook. If you search that term, Hollis Wright, you'll find them there. And on Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Carter Clay with the law firm of Hollis Wright. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never need legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of this show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to this show or related to other specific legal matters, call, email, or text us to talk with one of our lawyers. You can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter to learn about important legal news that could affect you or your family member. Or simply contact us by going to WVTM13.com and click on the Attorneys link. Now, we know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and for watching The Attorneys right here on WVTM 13.
So that's why they never leave a message, I guess. That's it. Welcome back into The Attorneys. We appreciate you being with us tonight. Would love to have you join our conversation again. The easiest way to do that is to call, text, and email, and you'll find ways to do so at the bottom of the screen. Carter?
John, as you will recall, and as we all experienced in 2008, the economic downturn hit a lot of people really hard. They were unable to pay bills, they were unable to pay on their mortgage, and they really just got behind to the point to where those debt collectors really came knocking and coming going after them. And are there any laws that we have in place, either at the federal level or state level, to help protect individuals from debt collectors, so that it's not as if people are not wanting to pay the debt, but if they can't pay it, they can't pay it. So what laws do we have in place to help them in that kind of situation?
Well, the primary law is the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And that law says to debt collectors, it's okay to collect debt. You just can't lie, and you can't be unfair or harassing when you do it. So certainly consumers, we all need to pay our debts, but whether we can pay them or can't pay them, if we're dealing with a debt collector, they need to treat us with some respect and certainly not lie to us.
And what restraints are there that are in place that would prevent a debt collector from doing certain things towards an individual who owes on that debt?
Well, the main thing is just being truthful. The law says to a debt collector, don't lie about stuff. So if you owe me $4,000 and I sue you for $10,000, or I put on your credit report you owe $10,000, well, that's a lie. So, what can the consumer do? Well, the consumer can sue the debt collector. And in our experience, we've been doing this, for many, many years. If we find a debt collector is breaking the law, usually sending them a letter saying, please stop breaking the law. I would like you to be nice to me. Well, they're not going to care about that. So we sue them in federal court, and that gets their attention.
A question we've got here, does the FDCPA, does it apply to all debts as well as all debt collectors?
Okay, it's a very good question. The answer is no, it does not apply to all debts.
All right.
Generally not business debt. So if you have a small business, you owe Office Max or whoever money, it's not going to cover that. It's really personal or household debt.
Okay.
And but most debt collectors it will cover, so not the original creditor. So if I have a Capital One card and Capital One's calling me, the FDCPA is not going to apply to that.
Right.
But if Capital One hires a debt collector, then it will apply.
Or alternatively, if you owe medical bills, or if you owe a power bill, or those types of things. I think this is a really important point that the viewers need to understand, is that the original creditor, where the original bill was originated, they are not subject to the FDCPA.
Right.
And does that mean that they can call you and harass you and threaten you and do those types of things to get you to pay on that bill? Or are there any protections in place to protect the debtor from even the original creditor?
Great question. There are some protections. It's not as good, I'll say that. Alabama law, we have some things called invasion of privacy, other laws here that say to debt collectors or even original creditors, you can collect your debt, but it has to be reasonable. And that brings up the question, well, what's reasonable? Well, a lot of times we can look to that federal law, the FDCPA, and say, well, that tells us what's reasonable.
What activities is a debt collector allowed to engage in to collect a debt? Can they come and knock on your door? Can they call you at any time of the day? Can they call you at your business? Can they call your boss and tell your boss that you are indebted to this creditor and that you're not paying on your debts? What are the limitations in that regard?
Well, they can certainly write you a letter, and they can call you. Now, when they start calling your boss, calling neighbors, family members, we call that third-party contacts. So anybody other than you or your spouse. So if they're calling neighbors, family members, co-workers, that usually will violate the law. And they have to call during reasonable time periods. So generally 8 in the morning to about 8 or 9 at night. Now, if you tell a debt collector, hey, I worked second shift and I'm asleep during this period, don't call me, well, then they're not supposed to call you.
Give us an example. Maybe you've got a current case right now, or you've had cases in the past. Give us some extreme, kind of outrageous examples of things that you've seen debt collectors do where clearly it went overboard.
Well, we had one case where our lady, she admittedly owed money. I think it was $1,000 or something. Debt collector called her, said, you have to pay. She said, I'm a single parent. I've had some medical issues. I just don't have the money. They said, well, we're going to call your parents. We're going to call your boss. We're going to call your coworkers. Now, a lot of times they make that threat, which is illegal to make, but they know not to do it. But I guess I'll give this collector credit. She followed through on her threats. She called the mom, the dad, the boss, the coworkers, and just with no remorse. And so that was a case where we had some recordings, and even the federal judge listening to those recordings was kind of like, wow, that's, everybody knows you're not supposed to do that.
And that was over $1,000?
Right.
I wonder what they would do if it was $10,000 or $20,000.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, sometimes they get really creative. I mean, I've gotten calls where, they ask me to go tell the neighbor,
right.
And they can't do that, can
That's
they?
right, that's right. That is a classic thing. They call that a block party.
Yeah.
They call all your neighbors. So your neighbors come to you and say, hey, somebody's trying to reach you.
Yeah.
It's very embarrassing.
Right, yeah.
Golly.
No need for that. All right, time for our final break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder of how you can join the conversation. Just a few minutes remaining for you to do so, so take advantage of this opportunity. Stay tuned. The final segment of The Attorney is coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis, Wright. Now, we often hear the phrase burden of proof when it comes to civil or criminal lawsuits. It's the level of proof that a plaintiff must meet to win their case. But these burdens change whether you're in a civil or a criminal court. So in this week's Legal 4-in-1, we're answering the question, who holds the burden of proof and what is the burden in the case? Let's start with civil cases. Civil cases are brought by a plaintiff who claims they have been injured by some way by a defendant. Because there is no chance of jail time, since the injury does not amount to a crime, the burden of proof is not as difficult as in criminal cases. The level of proof here is called preponderance of the evidence. In general terms, that means the plaintiff must prove that it is more likely true than not true that the defendant is responsible for the plaintiff's injuries. You've seen the scales of justice before. Both parties have to fill those scales up with evidence to support their position. If the plaintiff can fill his scale up with just a bit more evidence than the defendant, the plaintiff wins the civil case and is entitled to a verdict. Now, the stakes are much higher in a criminal case than that of a civil case. That's because a criminal defendant could lose his freedom or even his life if he's found guilty. So who holds the burden of proof in a criminal case? Well, the state does, because the defendant is being accused of breaking state law. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. It's the heaviest burden in the justice system. The evidence has to be so convincing that the jury believes beyond any reasonable dispute the defendant is guilty. Probably guilty just isn't enough in these cases. The law requires the jury to find the defendant not guilty if there is any doubt at all. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment here. So if you've got a question, now's the, you got just a few minutes to take advantage of this opportunity. Also, live attorneys standing by to speak with you as well. Just call that number you see there on the screen. We've been talking a lot about the FDCPA and how it prevents harassment by debt collectors. What are some actions that would be considered harassment under that?
Well, a couple would be using profanity or racial slurs, and we sometimes see that. Obviously, if they threaten to do physical violence to you, which they don't really say that directly, but We did have one where they called this lady, she was at home alone at night, and they said, we're sending our agents to your house.
Really?
You know, and we might look at that later and go, well, surely she wouldn't believe that, but you know, crazy things happen.
Yeah.
So.
How often do you have these conversations recorded as opposed to just having to strictly rely upon initially your client's representation that in fact occurred?
Most of the time we do not have the recordings. And so the debt collectors, they'll say they record everything. If it's a recording where they're being nice to our people, they have that. The ones where they're very harassing, those are accidentally deleted.
But I would think they would have an activity log where you could at least identify that they recorded this conversation, but then the next 4 they did not, and perhaps that's when they actually used the racial slur or cussed them out or what have you.
Yeah, we do that, and we'll look at our own cell phone records, and because again, very important calls will be missing from the debt collection records, but we say, well, look at my cell phone bill, there's a 15-minute call. And then they go, oh, we just found that missing data. So,
John, in the remainder of the time that we have here, I want to shift gears and talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act case or statute that we have in place, and talk about credit reporting agencies. Do we still just have the big 3 credit reporting agencies that have commonly been out there?
yeah, we have Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Now there are dozens of other ones, but those are the big 3.
And what exactly is the purpose of these credit reporting agencies?
Well, their goal and their purpose is to say, we'll collect all this data and then we will sell that to creditors so creditors can decide, you know, should I make a loan to you? Should I lease an apartment, give you a security clearance, you know, in case of an employer? And so their job is to compile all that information and to do it accurately.
And so there really is truly a link between the credit reporting agencies and these debt collectors, because the debt collectors are the ones that would be providing the information to the credit reporting agencies for purposes of putting it on an individual's credit report.
Right, and the credit reporting agencies sell the data to the debt collectors. They'll say, give us a list of people, and when certain things happen, we will alert you that now's a good time to collect against Joe or Bill or Susie or whoever it may be. So they're very much tied together.
And so nowadays, if an individual is going to get a loan, if they're going to buy a house, if they're going to rent an apartment or any of those types of things, I know that the first thing that these banks or apartment complexes will do is they're going to pull a credit report.
Right.
And they're going to take a look at that credit report to see how worthy the person's credit is. Is that fair?
That's right.
And are you seeing in your practice, do you get calls frequently from individuals that say there are errors or inaccuracies on their credit report?
We do. It's a good bit of that. Some of it is identity theft, but it's just sort of good old-fashioned errors. You know, I had a $5,000 debt, I paid it, but the creditor is saying I still owe $5,000.
And how does the Credit Reporting Act, which is a federal statute, how does it go to protect individuals' rights in that regard, and what does it do in essence?
I'd say 2 big things. One, it lets you get your credit reports, and people can do that for free through annualcreditreport.com. And then it says that there are errors on there, you have the right to dispute it. Now you can do it online, you can actually do it by phone. We recommend, it's a little old-fashioned, but we recommend people mail a letter, certified mail. Any information that will help the credit reporting agency see, oh, okay, I have false information here, give that to them. And so once the credit reporting agency gets that, they have about 30 days to investigate, and they either say, we're keeping it, we're not changing it, or we're fixing it. And then if they fix it, great. If they don't fix it, then that's when we go to the next step.
So there are 3 reporting agencies, right?
Those are the big
the 3 big ones. And can you get a free credit report from each once a year?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And I guess you would recommend taking advantage of that, absolutely.
Right. Used to, we couldn't do that,
Right.
and you had to pay for it, and they made the mistake of sort of annoying a senator.
Yeah. Right.
You know, you annoy a U.S. senator to have congressional hearings. So anyway, that came about to say everybody has a right, once every 12 months, you can pull Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. And so we do recommend pull those every 12 months.
Yeah, because you don't want to wait until you
Right.
need a loan, and then they're going to run a credit report or background check on you, and then all of a sudden you see these errors and inaccuracies. If you get one a year, get it for free. If there are inaccuracies on there, you can go ahead and dispute it and try and get it resolved.
Yeah, I think what's that old expression, dig your well before you're thirsty. You know, if you're waiting till the day before refinancing your house, there's not much time, you know.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of the program that if you or your firm is filing a lawsuit on behalf of an individual for a violation of the Debt Collecting Act, and then I think it will also apply to the Credit Reporting Act, you handle that on a contingency fee basis. What damages are allowed under those federal statutes for your clients to claim, and can you get attorney's fees and expenses associated with pursuing the cause of action?
Yeah, so to answer the attorney's fees, yes. So if we're successful, the judge can make the credit reporting agency, the debt collector, whoever it is, pay for our time. And then as far as damages, it's mainly what we call compensatory or actual damages. It's just, how did this harm me? It might be I lost my job or emotional distress, whatever it may be.
Yeah, we're just about out of time.
Okay.
We've got about a minute and a half remaining. It just flies on this conversation, but I want to give both of you an opportunity, just a final thought, and we'll start with you.
Sure, well, just kind of picking up on that point, if your rights are being violated, you've got to figure out what those rights are. That's why these types of shows that you guys do are so good. And then you have to take action on them. And that may be suing. And, you know, call your firm, call my firm, get with somebody that can give you some guidance on that.
Carter?
Well, I guess my knee-jerk advice is record all these conversations so that if you're getting harassed or the illegal debt collecting activities or credit reporting problems, you'll have it all documented. But in all seriousness, though, documentation is the absolute key. That you don't have to record the initial conversations, but if you are being harassed or if they're doing things that just from a common sense standpoint don't make sense, or it seems like this is really unreasonable type conduct, like contacting neighbors or contacting my bosses, at that point I would definitely recommend recording the conversations, documenting as much as you can, keeping your cell phone records so that you have a record of when they called you, the time that they called you, and those types of things, so that when you go see a guy like John Watts, you'll make his life a lot easier.
Yeah, great advice. Thanks, both of you, for being with us. The time just flew by. We also are grateful that you joined us as well. Thanks so much for the time. As we wrap things up, if you still have questions, here's how you can get in touch with the firm of Hollis Wright. Also find them on Facebook as well as Twitter. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.